Okay, what is a router? I know we need it for internet access, but are we going to get technical? How many episodes will be in this series? Trust me, as many as it takes. Makani can go on.
Uh, I think this might set a new record for our longest series yet.
Here we go. Here we go. Is Makani trying to turn me into a network engineer? Dude, you know I'm not a techie. I'm definitely no guru. So we got to keep it simple. What brings me hope is what is the metaphor we're going to use for this series? I like metaphors because they keep things simple. So, yes, here we go. Welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I'm Nick, and this is Super Simple Security Principles. Listen each week and learn how to think, not what to think. This is episode 51, our super chatty devices. When I read your line for that, I got a kick out of it. Like
you could tell what kind of
super.
mood I was in when I wrote this episode.
I love that you used part of our title for it too. Our super chatty devices.
Yep.
Uh, it is the first episode in a series on home network security. We talked about this last week. So, all right, man, I'm assuming we're going to get to the why. Having a sound understanding of some basics will help us with some simple layers of security, correct?
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
and we'll be talking. The why will be spread out a little bit between the first two episodes.
Okay, good.
So, in this episode, the why that we'll talk about. Well, there's a couple parts of the why actually in this one, and one in the next episode. The first part, though, is the internet is a war zone. And that's not really news, right? We've talked about a lot of different kinds of internet battles.
Right.
But this particular battle, the network attacks, is a little bit different because it's the most invisible to humans. The attacks aren't directed at humans. You don't the attack isn't delivered by a text or an email. It's directed directly, oh, that sounds weird, at our devices.
Okay.
And it's not about what any human is doing in the moment of the attack. It's about what the vast amounts of always on, always connected to the internet devices are doing.
That
And
makes
so
sense. That makes sense. They're always connected.
yeah, they're connected. And so that means the why really kind of boils down to every internet connected device you have is under constant threat of attack, even though that's not necessarily obvious to you.
Right.
And share a quick story. My brother Kem, who we hadn't talked about sometimes, he was setting up a new website recently for a personal project unrelated to what we do. But within seconds of that brand new website being all set up and visible, it was under attack. He hadn't even sent it out or shared it with anybody, and it was under attack. And this was not unexpected. We've set up lots of websites over the years, and they just, the moment they're visible, they're available on the internet, boom, they're under attack. And the amount of attacks, it ebbs and flows some, but it never really stops. It just pauses for a little while at best.
Right.
Now, the good news is most devices, even though they have access to the internet, they're not connected directly as part of the internet, aren't exposed in the same way as a website hosting device is. And we'll get into
Okay.
more about that. That's part of what we're going to be talking about, what the differences are and what kinds of attacks. And but the immediate point is that there is one device in your home, Nick, and in all of our listeners' home, most likely, that is exposed in this exact same way, and that's your router.
Okay. So our router is our weakest link.
Yep.
Sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And again, don't want to, we're not trying to freak people out because we're going to give you protections here too, right?
Right.
But it's important to understand if you're actually going to protect your home network, and it's all about protecting your router, uh, because it's the protection for all your other devices, and your router is literally available for attack 24/7, 365.
Like a
And
website.
yeah, exactly, like a website. And everybody, all the bad guys want to get into your router too.
Right.
So anyway, that kind of gives you a little bit of the why.
Okay.
So now a quick introduction of the series, and then we'll get into the content for today. But I want to introduce kind of the objective, the little bit of just a mini quick roadmap of what the series is going to do.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I've been mapping this out, and it definitely feels like it's going to be our longest series yet. Yeah, and I don't even have a guess about the number of episodes this time around, but I do have. Yeah, well, yeah, I'd be fair. I'd be surprised if it goes past 10, but we'll see. Oh, but I do have a set of objectives anyway.
Okay.
And so the first basic one, and what we'll be talking about for today's episode, is what I would characterize as the non-security fundamentals of computer networking, specifically of a home computer network, and a little bit how it's relevant to the internet. We're not trying to become the network engineer, just a teeny bit so that you can understand what we'll talk about in the rest of the episodes.
Yeah.
In episode 2, we'll probably talk about 3 types of network attacks that you want to be aware of, and that we'll then in the following episodes talk about different layers of protection for each of those 3 kinds of attacks. The good news is, unlike some kinds of attacks, like with the phone spying and stuff, there's not a lot you can do there, but there are a lot of tools. There are a lot of options that we can do to really keep ourselves safe. So,
Okay. Good deal. That's good.
and a few things to avoid. Actually, in some cases, it's mostly you don't even need to add a layer of protection. Just don't do this thing that opens a gaping wide hole into your home network.
Oh, sweet.
So there's some things like that too. So I think the next thing is answering that question. Is Makani trying to turn me into a network engineer? I want to dive into that just a little bit more. Because, obviously I was in kind of a goofy mood when I wrote that, but, I've had a lot of people ask me about protecting their computer, about a VPN or an antivirus or a firewall, and they're like, sometimes they're even asking, I don't even know what it does for me. Right? Do I actually need it? What does it do for me? And I'm trying to have this quick conversation, explain, okay, well, this is what it does for you, but it's not as easy as, like, say you buy a tool, a physical, real, non-digital tool. You get a hand mixer, a vacuum, anything. You can demonstrate it. You can tinker with it. You can practice with it until you know how to use it,
Right.
safely or not, depending on how careful of a person you are. But you can use it anyway.
Yeah.
And computer tools, of course, they're a little bit trickier. But the goal of this is to kind of help explain that. So when you're picking your tools, okay, I have a tool that will do this, and this is how it protects me. And you can evaluate, is it actually doing its job? You can use it effectively, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Makes total
So
sense.
that's the goal. I don't want to, I love talking about this stuff, but yeah, I don't want to, talk about a bunch of stuff that I just, because I love talking about it.
Right.
I definitely tried to make sure that even though, and I emphasize this with this one because so much of it today is, well, pretty much all of it, honestly, won't be directly about security. And so I just kind of want to preempt it. If you start thinking, dude, why is he going on about this stuff? It's it's the foundation for all the rest of this series. And so, we'll try to keep it as short and sweet and simple, of course, as possible. But anyway, that's the reason. So,
And coming from my experience, I'll share this with the listeners. Coming from my experience,
yeah,
is Makani's not going to overwhelm you. Not going to overwhelm you. We're going to take this in bite-sized bits, but there's also a reason for all the madness, we'll say. Why is your router important? There's going to be reasons to it, and so he does a great job at keeping it simple. I'm excited. This is going to be something. I mean, you tell me my router's immediately exposed 24/7 like a website, and I'm going, man, I got to add some layer of security right there because, I've had, you know, similar, I think we're talking about the same story about website coming under attack. And so, anyways, yeah, I'm excited to see how we can layer up, you know? So
yeah. Well, thank you for that endorsement, and good to hear that. That's yeah, we're on the same page. So, okay, so the next thing I think is to introduce the metaphor.
okay.
Now, as I titled it, our chatty devices, right? Because our devices, especially these days, ever more than, actually, Kevin and I, we were reviewing, how much bandwidth, how much, our devices are talking.
Yeah.
And wow, it had gone up so much more even than we had expected. There's just so much going on.
Really?
Yeah. So because, with your internet service provider, you have limits on how much you can download. You have the speeds, right, that everybody hears about, but you
Right.
also usually have limits. Sometimes it's unlimited, and if you go look on your router, you can see in a month or how much you're downloading. And we both looked and compared, and I was really blown away. That was kind of the inspiration for for this episode's title, because I was like, wow, it has really gone up even just over the years. So,
That's crazy. Okay.
but so the metaphor though is a phone call. That it's that simple. And so each time a device talks to another device, I want you to think about it like it's making a phone call. Okay?
Okay.
And that means that so there's one device that's making the phone call, and the other device gets to decide, am I going to answer this phone call or am I going to ignore it?
Yeah.
Right? If the call is answered, then they exchange information for a while and then they hang up. Now, the pattern, the purpose, the frequency of those calls, of course, is nothing like humans calling each other.
Right.
But the basic elements are going to be the same: making a call, answering or ignoring the call, and that's a really critical piece because you want to ignore the bad ones, right?
Right.
If possible, exchanging information and then ending the calls. And some devices like the ones where websites live, for example, are designed primarily to accept calls.
Right. Makes sense.
They need to answer them like we've talked about all the time. Other devices, like your phone, are primarily designed to make phone calls to other devices. We don't really want a lot of incoming ones, comparatively at least.
Right.
Um, And so some examples of these, just to make it very clear in people's head of when this happens, is, say your phone might be checking for email every minute. Your printer might check with its manufacturer's website every day for updates. And when you do things, when you go and check email, when you go visit a website, when you do anything, behind the scenes, your device is making tons and tons of little phone calls behind the scenes to make that happen.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I get it. I like it.
okay.
Yeah.
So we'll
So
we'll build
all
on that.
these, yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
it's making all these little phone calls all the time. Is okay.
Yep. And there's different categories of phone calls and different rules about the phone calls and things like that. But that's kind of our baseline is these phone calls. So that's the metaphor. And then how we're going to tie that in is going to kind of give you a simplified definition of what a computer network is, um,
Okay.
and what your router is. So we'll start with the network. And for our purposes, we're going to define a network basically as a collection of devices that are allowed to make phone calls to each other.
Okay. So
Um,
like this could be our laptops, our phones, our
right. Well, so if we look at your home network, that's going to be your phone, printer, any devices that are physically at your home. If they might be connected with a network cable, an Ethernet cable, or over Wi-Fi, right? But all the
okay.
devices at your home are on a network. All the devices at my home are also on a network, but a different network than your network.
That made it sink in a little bit clearer. I'm like, oh wait a second. Like we've got TVs, you
Right, and
know.
that's on your network. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be
Like
another one, assuming they're internet capable, but these days, yeah.
I was gonna say that's pretty standard these days.
Yep. Yep.
Crazy. Crazy. So there's more devices than you realize. When you said printer, I was like, holy crap. Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
is.
there's a lot of them. And we're going to kind of simplify some of the concepts of the network and how they are connected. We're really just going to worry about two kinds of network: home networks, so your home network, my home network, each listener's individual home network, and then of course the internet.
Okay.
um, and so because when again we go back to that definition of the network, they're allowed to make phone calls to each other, right?
Right, right.
So the devices on your local network, that's what it's called, is your local home network. um, they can talk to each other. But what if they want to talk to a device that's far away, somewhere on the internet?
Yeah.
Right? Now that's where your router comes in.
Yeah.
That's your gateway to the internet. And in some place you'll actually see in settings and things that it's talked about as your gateway.
Yeah.
Okay, because the router has a very unique role. Unlike most devices, which are members of a single network, your router belongs to two networks: your home network and the internet network.
Right. That makes
Okay,
yeah. Yep.
because
Like your
it has,
internet provider network, right?
yeah, well, so again, that's why we're kind of simplifying it. The layer that your internet provider uh, is kind of a physical network, and this is more of the logical network. We're glossing over some of that
Okay.
because it doesn't matter. So we simplified that. Yes, there's a lot of that is very relevant in some instances, just not really for our purposes. And so
Okay.
we're basically treating it as the router goes from your house, because it's visible logically on the internet to people, even
Okay.
though the physical, like, transmission of devices, of signals, I mean, it does have to travel through your internet service provider. And so, but that's just mostly not relevant for our purposes,
Okay.
basically,
We're just
if that
keeping it
makes
super
sense.
simple. Yep.
Yeah. And so
Okay.
that's why from our perspective, basically your router exists and is visible on the internet and on your home network. And it can be the bridge, because it's allowed to make and talk to devices on the internet, and all the devices on your local network can talk to your router. And so it's the thing that lets them talk to devices on the internet because they're not allowed to directly. They need the help of a device on the internet.
Makes sense.
And so there's a difference between being on the internet, as we're talking about it here, being actually part of the internet network, being visible there, and being connected to it as we normally think about it, right? Because it just all happens
Right.
behind the scenes. Your phone can talk to websites, obviously, very easily. But it's only able to do that because it got connected to your local Wi-Fi and then went out through the router.
Went through the router. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So looks like you're with me so far, right?
Yep. With you so far. We kept that pretty simple. You were keeping it more simple than even I was thinking. So.
Perfect. Good.
Yes.
Well, and so then I think one of the main other details that's interesting or important to realize too is, so not only when you're going outbound, so like when your phone wants to talk to the website, right? Let's
Right.
say the website wanted to talk to your phone, or whatever,
Yeah.
any device on the internet wants to talk to your phone. Well, if it wants to do that, it's going to have to get permission of your router. It's going to have to go through your router, just like the other direction. It can't just directly talk to your phone like it can the router. It can hit up the router and say, I want to talk to somebody or whatever, if it knows about your phone. But the router has to give permission, essentially.
Okay. Cool.
And so that's why it becomes the key piece of when we're talking about home network security, is understanding the router's role and making sure that it's configured properly to provide the protection you want.
Right. Makes sense.
And so in terms of the phone calls, what that basically boils down to is its job is to determine which calls it's going to accept and which ones it's going to reject.
Right.
And the router actually behind the scenes, we'll talk about this more in a future one, but there's different pieces of it. And I'm sure you've heard it very common word these way, especially in movies and stuff, is firewall, right?
Yeah.
And the firewall is actually the specific piece that really is the primary thing that does the job of that call rejection logic. So
Okay.
we'll get into that more, but just to kind of tie that in a little bit to something that you've heard about, get past the firewalls, always in the movies, there's three firewalls or whatever they're talking about, always makes me laugh, but anyway, so I think, yeah, I'm just looking at my notes. I think that answers everything that we need to for today. Any questions that came up?
No, we got the router, we got the metaphors with all the calls that they're making. Like, I think we've kind of reached that point in time.
Okay.
I think we've hit our call to action, don't you?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Okay, let's hear it. What's our call to action?
So this is going to be a kind of a preparation one. I want you to locate the router in your home. And then write down the brand and look around on there and find a model number too.
Okay.
And that's it. Just for now, just gather that because we're going to need that later on in the series so we can figure out some things about your router. But for now, just find out where it's physically located, the brand and model number, and write those down so you have it ready when we need it later.
Okay, I could do that. Find it, brand, model number, write it down, have it ready.
Yep. And on model number, there's a lot of times, like a lot of different things, numbers on there. We don't care about the serial number, for example. That identifies that specific device. But the model number, it just tells you what kind of category of thing it is, so we can find it's what you need, so you can find like the manual for it and that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
So anyway, okay, so I'll pass it back to you to introduce the next episode.
Awesome. Yeah, next episode is going to be number 2 in this series, We're learning about 3 kinds of network attacks we want to protect our home network against. So, look, nobody wants to be a victim of a network attack. So this upcoming episode is going to be awesome. I'm excited to see what we can do to thwart against these attacks. So let's go.
Yeah. Well, and like that'll be kind of a big why too to finish up the rest of the whys that'll kind of bring us through the rest of the episode or rest of the series. So
rest of the series, yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome.
It's gonna be good. Okay.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Are you ready to take action and wondering where to start? Get my Bulletproof My Identity Starter Kit for free. The 7 most vital layers of protection everyone needs. I'll send you one step at a time and help you if you get stuck. Just go to bulletproofmyid.com and enter your name and email, and I will send you the first step. Again, that's bulletproofmyid.com.